We're all staying over tonight. Isn't that wonderful? I was totally stunned by my mother-in-law's sudden announcement. Out of nowhere, she shows up at my house, and trailing behind her are 5 women of her age. I had no heads up that my mill was coming over today, let alone with a whole entourage to stay the night. My mill, grinning ear to ear, looks over her shoulder at her friends as she notices my shocked expression. Oh dear, forgive me, my daughter-in-law is a bit slow. So, are you planning to keep us at the doorstep forever? Feeling cornered, all I could do was frown at my mill's command to hurry up and let them in. Annoyed or impatient, she tries to step inside anyway, but I point to something. Excuse me, Mill, about this. My name is Julie, a full-time housewife who's 6 months pregnant. I've been dealing with severe morning sickness, so I took maternity leave early from the restaurant where I've worked for over a decade. I love my job and was blessed with great coworkers, so I really wanted to work up to the last minute, but my husband and colleagues insisted I take it easy. And I couldn't be happier. That's because, after 5 years of marriage, we're finally expecting our first child. When my husband and I met, we were both already 28. Both of us loved kids, but given our age, we tried not to get our hopes up too much. Juggling busy careers, we saved money and looked forward to our annual vacation as one of our major joys. Whether we had kids or not, we agreed to cherish these times, and then miraculously, we found out we were expecting. However, almost as soon as we found out, my husband was assigned a long-term business trip. He tried to negotiate with this company, but due to business needs, they insisted he was the best fit, so he had to stay out of town for about a year. That meant I'd have to manage day-to-day life, prenatal visits, and potentially even the birth on my own. My husband was really worried, but in the end, he tightly gripped my hand and said, "I'll work hard and earn for you and the baby." Since he would be transferring our living expenses, I could focus on household chores. Whenever I felt up to it, I did some remote work to add a bit to our savings. Some folks might have gone back to their parents' house for a break, but my parents died in a car accident when I was young. All that was left were my sister, 3 years older than me, and myself. With no other relatives to take us in, we were both placed in foster care. Since then, we've consulted on even the smallest matters, getting through life without even quarreling. My sister was always the responsible one, but after our parents died, she became even more reliable. Despite her worries, she never let a tear drop in front of me. She's already married with kids and is leading a happy life. So I didn't want to burden her. On my husband's side, his father passed away a few years ago. He had been the CEO of a food company and was a workaholic right up to his last days. The company is now headed by my mother-in-law, and my husband, Mike, became the vice president and coup. I was told even before our marriage that Mike would often be away on business trips, covering for his elderly mill at branch offices and client companies. Although we rarely get time to relax together, I couldn't complain much because we've been heavily relying on Mike's income, especially since I got pregnant. But this time, his extended business trip makes me wonder if it's deliberately timed. I get that Mike is the best fit for the job given the talent and workload of the company. However, considering the timing and my mill's personality, I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. It's not just because I'm grappling with a growing baby bump and fluctuating health. Unfortunately, I'm well aware that my mill dislikes me. She's always been somewhat cold, but her harassment escalated after her husband passed away, causing me stress. Ignoring me is the norm. When I visit her place, my shoes get hidden and money is stolen from my purse when I'm not looking. Though it's obviously her, she flat out denies it for lack of proof. What? You're saying I'm a thief? Show me the evidence. Did you mark the money? Or maybe you have a photo of me stealing. Your parents aren't around. Got disowned for bad behavior. Whatever the reason. Do you think a woman raised in foster care is qualified to be my son's wife? She spews all sorts of hateful comments at me whenever she can. Furthermore, she warned me not to speak a word of this to Mike. Go ahead and tattle. I'll make sure Mike loses his job and kick you out. Then what'll you do? Being jobless together? Given her extreme personality, she might actually do it. I've been holding my tongue because I love Mike, and I don't want to deprive our child of his father due to my issues with the mill. The silver lining, our homes are more than an hour's drive apart, so thankfully, we don't meet that often. I was in the middle of my pregnancy, a time often referred to as the stable period, when my sister invited me on a mini vacation. Both my sister and her husband had time off for the long weekend, and they were planning to leave their child with him. The main purpose of the trip was to visit our parents' graves to inform them about my pregnancy, as their Memorial Day happened to be around that time. My sister was very considerate of how I was feeling, making sure we had plenty of downtime and even finding a maternity-friendly hotel. When I told my husband over the phone, he encouraged me to go and have a good time. I made sure to cover the travel expenses from my own savings, so I didn't touch our household funds. I was experiencing lots of changes in my physical condition, so I started packing little by little, but everything was ready by the day of the trip. My sister was supposed to pick me up in her car that morning, and from there we'd go to the train station. While I was nervously doing a final check on my luggage, the doorbell rang. Excited and unable to suppress my smile, I opened the door, only to find not my sister but my mill standing there. And behind her were 5 unfamiliar older women. What's with the confused face? Can we stay over starting today? Excuse me, these ladies have come from far away. Don't just stand there. Let us in. Still not comprehending what was happening, I stood there, stunned. Come on, Julie. Why are you just standing there? Make us some coffee. I figured you'd be just lazing around during the long weekend, so we came to visit. Be grateful. One of the women said, it must be hard being pregnant, but you're in the stable period, right? I worked right up until giving birth. Must be nice to be able to relax with a well-off husband. This irked me. But since we are living on my husband's income, I couldn't argue. But still, for them to suddenly show up like this, especially knowing I'm pregnant, and to bring friends without asking, was just plain odd. This is beyond inappropriate, especially since it's not even their home. These ladies are friends from my mill's hobby club, and they also hang out privately. Apparently, they decided to synchronize their days off during the long weekend and have a girls' trip for 5 nights and 6 days. That's when my mill volunteered our home. I've heard a lot about you from Sarah. You're such a capable daughter-in-law, managing all the household chores while pregnant. You even said, please stay here, right? And with 3 meals a day. My mill fabricated this whole story and kept it from me to prevent me from backing out. I was pretty baffled by this unprecedented level of manipulation and couldn't hold back anymore. I confronted her. Excuse me, Mill, look at this. I pointed at the suitcases at the entrance. clearly not packed for a day trip. My Mill's face twitched. Before she could say anything, I continued, "I'm sorry, but I never heard about any of this. Actually, I'm planning to visit my sister out of state. Could you please leave?" She was taken aback, probably not expecting me to object. "Well, I've been talking about this for a month, haven't I? If you don't remember, that's on you, Julie. You're unemployed, so you can go visit your family anytime. Just postpone it." She couldn't raise her voice as usual, probably because her friends were watching. She faked a smile, sweat forming on her forehead. Seeing the ladies whispering behind her, I seized the opportunity. "You said the sleepover was decided a week ago, right? Then how could I have known a month ago that I'd need to vacate my house? Maybe you're the one who's mistaken, Mill. I probably pushed it too far, but it was too late." She glared at me, her face red with anger. But she couldn't lash out because people were around. Whatever happens next, if I let her in now, I'd be playing right into her hands. Caught in a standoff at my front door, I felt increasingly uneasy. My Mill, Sarah, and her friends were pressing me with outrageous demands. Let us in, make coffee, walk to the supermarket, and buy a ton of booze. Hardly the behavior you'd expect from guests in someone else's home. I was actually worried they might just barge in. Right then, my sister Emily arrived, her face turning pale upon seeing Sarah and her friends. Seeming to notice the distressed look on my face, Emily immediately jumped into the fray. "Oh, are you Julie's sister? How coincidental. We were just about to have a girls' sleepover here, invited by Julie herself. Did you come to help? What a dutiful daughter-in-law she has. Actually, I'm just here to pick up my sister. We have plans and can't entertain you. Could you please get out of the way?" At Emily's firm words, Sarah went silent for a moment. But quickly, she started talking to her friends with a smirk, blatantly mocking Emily. "Oh my, in the way, you say, even though you know I'm Julie's Mill. Unbelievable. You must have had poor upbringing. Seriously, who says you're in the way to someone they've just met? That's just basic manners." "Excuse me, but as I see it, you're the suspicious ones here, insisting on entering my sister's home after she's clearly said no multiple times. Please leave. If you don't, I will call the police for trespassing." Unfazed, Emily stared down Sarah and her snickering friends. At the mention of calling the police, Sarah's face turned red as she yelled at Emily. "What's with that attitude? If you're invited, you should be welcomed. What an infuriating woman. Who do you think you are, threatening to call the police? Unbelievable, from a stranger." But Emily's gaze remained icy, even as Sarah and her friends escalated their taunts. Finally, their comments veered into explicit threats. "Oh, why even bother with this dumb woman and her kid? If we give that belly a good thump, we wouldn't have to bother with the grandchild, huh?" Amidst their crude laughter, Emily, who had remained emotionless, narrowed her eyes. By the way, the biggest issue in situations like this often turns into a he said, she said debate. So, just so you know, I've been recording since I got here. My sister, Emily, held her smartphone up with a bright smile. The screen clearly displayed that it was recording, showing the time ticking at 7 minutes and 5 seconds, then 6 seconds. "As I've been saying, you should leave. Threatening to hit my pregnant sister, who is also the homeowner, is a whole new level of crime, don't you think?" Caught off guard, my mother-in-law stammered as her friend scrambled away, saying, "I didn't say anything, and I was just invited. I had no idea Emily was going out." By the time Mill realized what was happening, her friends had hastily retreated from the house. Ignoring me, Mill bolted in their direction. Emily sighed deeply, loading my travel bag into her car. "Are you okay? Why on earth did you open the door without checking who it was? If those people were more aggressive, who knows what would have happened?" I kept apologizing as Emily drove off, fastening our seat belts. Emily glanced at me. "You're not being pushed around by that woman, are you? She doesn't seem like a nice mill. You're not alone anymore. You know stress isn't good for you right now, right? Does Mike know about this? Please don't tell me you haven't told him yet. Maybe you should explain it to him over the phone now." Emily, who knows me too well, realized I hadn't been consulting my husband properly. I gripped my phone and tried to call Mike, but unfortunately, he didn't pick up. While waiting for a call back, I slowly started telling Emily about Mill's antics, how she's been hostile toward me, and how she's threatened to fire Mike, who's an executive at her company, if I spoke up. I had also been warned that if I told Emily, she'd force a divorce and ruin her own family. The thought of my Mill's past actions made me tear up uncontrollably. Emily tried to drive as smoothly as possible, but my tears just wouldn't stop, perhaps due to the hormonal imbalances of pregnancy. I thought I'd try to enjoy my night out with my sister, but my mood shows no signs of lifting. On top of that, crying isn't making me feel any better. Still, I've pretty much made up my mind. I'm going to talk to my husband about this situation and focus on protecting our unborn child. Given that I'm stressed out from my Mill's harassment, the one who's most at risk here is the baby. Yet, because I'm too weak to speak out, I continue to cause stress for myself and, as a result, the baby. Can I really be a mom? Will telling my husband get me fired by my Mill? What will happen to our lives then? The more I think about these uncertainties, the deeper my anxieties get. Just as I let myself cry, relieved by seeing my sister after a long time, I suddenly find it hard to breathe. I try to calm down, but that only makes me feel worse, and breathing becomes even more difficult. My throat and chest tighten, and after realizing I can't breathe, I start to panic. I also feel a sharp pain in my stomach and let out a faint moan. "Hey, Julie, are you okay? Hold on, I'm pulling over." I hear my sister shouting from the driver's seat as my vision starts to blur. I feel down, thinking I'm causing trouble again. And then everything in front of me becomes clear and sharp. I look up at a white ceiling, realizing from its height and color that I'm not in my sister's car. I glance around and see I'm apparently in a hospital, lying on a clean bed. There's a fork connected to me and a belt-like thing wrapped around my stomach. No one's around, so I press the nurse call button and a nurse rushes in. According to her, I fainted from hyperventilation. My sister called an ambulance for me, and I was immediately admitted to the hospital. I was diagnosed with a high risk of preterm labor, so they've strapped a fetal heartbeat monitor to my belly. I had a sinking feeling when I heard about the risk factors for preterm labor, like stress and intense physical activity. I couldn't help but think about the chores and verbal abuse piled on me by my Mill. It seems like all of that was putting the baby in danger. My sister and husband visited me while I was in bed, following the doctor's orders for absolute rest. While I was sleeping, my sister had filled my husband, Mike, in on everything that had happened. As soon as Mike saw my face, he collapsed to his knees, repeating how glad he was that I was okay. When he heard that the baby's heartbeat was stable, he burst into tears and apologized to me. "I'm so sorry this happened while I wasn't around. I take responsibility for not noticing sooner. Just give me a little time to handle this," he said. Then he stepped out of the room, leaving me alone with my sister. My sister had taken care of everything for me, even going home to grab extra clothes and toiletries that I didn't have in my overnight bag. Come on, I've been your sister for years. I know where you keep stuff. Just kidding. Mike actually told me where to find things in an email, she said, smiling. Her smile eased my tension, and I found myself apologizing for not being able to go on the trip. Just then, Mike returned. His face was flushed, perhaps from anger, but he gradually calmed down and explained the situation. I've told my mom she needs to step down as CEO, using her position to bully you and even involving her friends. She has no business being in charge. She objected, of course, but the company's been in decline since she took over. She has neither the skill nor the desire to improve. Other executives are already on board with the decision, so she won't change my mind, he said. Mike then bowed deeply to my sister and said, I'm sorry for the trouble. Rest assured, I'll protect both Julie and our baby. Seeing Mike act this way reassured me that I could trust him to handle things from here on. After that, Mike visited me every day. During those visits, his phone was constantly ringing. It's probably just my mom, he said, muting the notifications. I was in the hospital for about a week, taking a break and staying away from my mill. My health improved significantly, so I was set to be discharged. Because there was a chance I'd run into my mill at home, I decided to stay temporarily at my sister's place. Around the same time as my discharge, my husband returned from a business trip and stayed home just in case Mill showed up. Sure enough, Mill came by our house. My husband tried to send her packing, but just as he was closing the front door, she screamed, I'm in big trouble with a client, Mr. Johnson. Help! Curious, my husband listened and found out she had been having an affair with the CEO of a client's company. Because of this, she was at risk of losing her position. Mill had gone to her lover for help, but had been caught by the man's wife. Now everyone at the company was going to hear about it, pushing her closer to being fired. Thanks to Mill's actions, the board members who were hesitant because of their respect for my Phil now had a reason to fire her. Mill ended up losing her job and also faced a hefty alimony claim from her lover's wife. Apparently, she's been harassing the board members, thinking she could easily pay the alimony if she kept her job. For some reason, she hasn't reached out to me lately. Feeling it's safe, I decided to return home. To be cautious, my sister agreed to visit during the day when my husband isn't around. Both my sister and husband agreed we should make sure I'm never alone. One evening, I got a text from my husband saying he was on his way home. As my sister was getting ready to leave, we heard loud banging from the balcony. Startled, we hesitantly pulled back the curtains, and there she was, my Mill. She must have seen the lights on and assumed I was home. Seeing my Mill banging on the glass with a crazed look, my knees gave out. I was shocked to see her on the balcony, a place she couldn't possibly reach unless she'd climbed the fence. Where on earth did she come from? I couldn't hear what my Mill was yelling, since the balcony window was made of thick glass for security. All I could do was stare blankly at her as she kept hitting the glass. Just a woman hitting it with her bare hands wouldn't even crack the glass. However, if she found the gardening shovel on the balcony, it could get dangerous. Seeing me panic, my sister seemed to keep her cool. She took out a video camera just in case and started filming my Mill. While she was doing that, I nervously dialed the police and texted my husband. My husband had already left work and encouraged me, saying he'd be home in a few minutes. In the meantime, my sister comforted me with one arm while explaining the situation to the police. The police arrived before my husband did, and my sister guided them from the front door to the balcony. Seeing the police through the window, my Mill looked shocked and suddenly climbed over the balcony railing and disappeared. The police instantly split up, one heading for the balcony and the other circling around from the front door. For a moment, I worried she might have escaped, but that concern quickly vanished. It seemed that my Mill had misstepped while climbing over the railing and was caught writhing on the ground by the police officer who had circled around. My Mill was arrested and taken away, and my sister handled all the questioning for me. I felt pathetic for relying on my sister yet again, but I shook off the negativity and explained everything to my husband when he got back. Choosing not to be alone for just a few hours turned out to be the right call. The thought of what would have happened if my sister wasn't there sends shivers down my spine. In the end, my Mill got arrested for trespassing. The audio my sister recorded, where Mill talked about hitting me, certainly helped, although no assault charges were applied since she didn't actually harm me. Instead, it turns out Mill had also trespassed onto other residents' balconies, so they're pursuing that angle. My husband's company faced some hardships after the CEO got arrested, putting them in a difficult spot. Still, thanks to the earnest efforts from my husband and other executives, and the solid reputation built by my father-in-law, the company is hanging on. Moving forward, my husband is stepping in as the new CEO, determined to make the company even better than it was under his father. On the other hand, with Mill out of my life, I was able to proceed with my pregnancy in peace. The delivery went surprisingly smoothly, giving birth to a healthy baby boy. During my hospital stay, not just my husband but also my sister and her family visited almost every day. After discharge, they've been coming over to help with chores. My sister's daughter, who started middle school this year and wants to be a child care provider, couldn't stop saying how cute the baby is. I let her hold him until she was content. Seeing the interaction between her kids and my baby filled me with joy, a dream I've had since childhood. I'm sure my sister feels the same. Her eyes, watching our children, were gentler than I've ever seen. After my maternity leave, I went back to work and was able to resume doing what I love. That said, I couldn't work full-time like before. I could only manage around 3-hour shifts until my child grows a bit more. The postpartum stress felt like nothing compared to the harassment from my Mill during the pregnancy. I find myself hardly getting irritated with my long-awaited child and feel like I can be pretty laid back with him. About 2 years later, we discovered a second child was on the way. While I was eagerly awaiting my first pregnancy, this time was different. Of course, we wanted another child, but we were more relaxed about it this time, discussing it as a couple. And I guess that's why the stork decided to bring us another baby. Our son is also delighted at the prospect of having a sibling, and he's been patting my belly almost every day. As a family, we're all eagerly looking forward to meeting our new addition, living each day in happiness.